By popular demand, we are back for the 13th time. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Touching Greatness. I am Ted Sobel, at least I used to be. And our guest is Doug Krikorian. Between the lines, in this case, between the lines, but in general, between the bylines of his wonderful autobiography and memoir. Dougie, it is great to have you finally on the show.
What's a privilege being with one of the legendary sportscasters and sporting gentlemen of Southern California, Teddy. I mean, we work together. You work
Yes,
with
we did.
everybody, from Chick Hearn to Vince Scully to Bobby Miller, and
Exactly.
everyone.
Okay, so you have been doing your job for 45 years covering sports in Southern California. And folks, if you don't know Doug Krikorian, you had to be in a hole somewhere, but whatever. But Doug is one of the most outspoken sports columnists ever, and we're going to bring some of that out in him today on this show. You think you can open up a little bit for us today, Doug?
Well, if you want me to, I certainly can.
Yes, don't hold back, baby. This is all about touching greatness. What can I tell you? 22 years at the LA Herald Examiner, the greatest sports page in my mind of all time, and 22 years of the Long Beach Press Telegram, and now he's looking to go 22 years into retirement, but he's not there yet. So that's the next phase of his career. Doug, let's talk about your book first of all. What was it like writing your book? I know it had to be emotional at times to
Yeah,
write the stories in your book, right?
well, it was about my late wife. She
Yes.
died 4 days after 9/11, and she was only 35 years old. She was diagnosed with colon cancer at
Wow.
33, and she was from England,
Yeah.
Hartlepool, England, which is near Newcastle. And we met in a train station in Crystal Palace in 1993, and we got married in 97. She was 5 months pregnant in 98 and lost the baby. And, a lot of bad things 2 years later, few years, 3 years later, she lost her life. So
Wow.
it was a tough ordeal. Perfect shape. She ran 7, 8 miles every day. She was a tremendous woman. Tremendous. She went to. I'll tell you how great she was. At Long Beach State, she took courses. She was a physical therapist for the English healthcare system, for senior citizens.
Yeah.
And she took 3 courses at Long Beach State to get her degree. She had to take a test here in California. She got A's in all of them, and she got sick, and the guy gave her an A anyway because she was best in the class. She was an exceptional human being, and to lose her so prematurely, that was kind of a tough thing for me at that, or to this day, obviously.
Of course. Of course. So, how does a kid who grew up in the San Joaquin Valley end up doing sports in Los Angeles?
Well, I'll give you a real quick synopsis here. My dad took me to see a place called Steel Stadium in San Francisco for a weekend series against the 1959 Dodgers, which are actually my all-time favorite team, along with, of course, the 2010, 2012, and 2014 San Francisco Giants. But I love that 59 Dodger team. They're a tremendous team. And I saw a bunch of guys behind home plate during batting practice in suits. I said, Daddy, what do those guys do? And he said, they're all sports writers. I said, do they travel with the team? He said, oh, yeah, they go all over the country. From that moment on, I wanted to be a sports writer.
I want to do that.
And little did I know, that was 59. 10 years later, I took, it was actually 9 years later, I took a late season road trip with the LA Dodgers on the K.O. O'Malley playing, prop jet. It was a prop jet.
Yep.
I took Bob Hunter's place late in the season for, we went to New York, Pittsburgh, and Houston. Little did I know, 9 years later, I would be a sports writer in Los Angeles.
All right. So, how many times did you pinch yourself on that flight?
You can't believe it. I really pinched myself the first flight I took with the Lakers. I was a beat writer.
Exactly.
In 1968 and 69, Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Mel Counts, Johnny Egan, Keith Erickson. The first trip, Chick introduced me to all the players, and At that time they were playing Wilt and Elgin and Jerry needed a fourth guy to play hearts. Can you imagine? On
Wow.
my first trip to the Lakers, I was the fourth guy because I knew how to play hearts.
Right.
I mean, you don't think I pinched myself? Of course I did. I'd be in a bus. I went with every. In those days, Ted, the Times would send a writer only during the playoffs. They didn't send it during the regulars. A couple times they did, but not very often. And Jim Murray went on one road trip during that season.
Right.
But and it was unbelievable. I was part of the team. I mean, I remember it was Thanksgiving in Philadelphia that year, and I was at their Thanksgiving dinner. I was
Sure.
when they took the bus to New York from Philly. I was with the team. I was with the team everywhere. I'd go to practice. It was quite an experience for a young man.
Of course. How
Very
many other beat writers were there at the same time with you? Just a couple?
well, for a lot of the regular season, Ted, there was no one. I was
Oh, you were the
literally
only
was
one traveled.
no, they didn't. Danny Hafner covered him, and he didn't go on the road trips. And
Oh,
later it was Mal
okay.
Florence, but Danny didn't go on the road. Obviously during that playoffs that year, yeah, if I recall, we played San Francisco Warriors at the Cow Palace, and we beat them, and I think we beat Atlanta in the first round, and then of course we played in the Boston Celtics.
Right. By the way, I love how you say "we," like you were the point guard.
No, I wasn't. I
And
should
you,
say the Lakers. Jesus, my
now I
knees
know,
have
but
been
you
so
know
low.
how we were raised. If you would have said that at the time, people would have said, "Wait, we? What are you, the owner?"
Well, trust me, I became a big critic of Bill Van Bredekoff. He didn't like me very much.
Well,
Sports
nobody liked him
Illustrated
at the
had him.
time either.
What's that?
Nobody liked him at the time either for his
Well,
moves with Wilt.
Wilt certainly didn't. That's for
Exactly.
sure.
What do you remember about that '69 series that he didn't bring Wilt back into the game? The Lakers lost, and forever it's always, "Hey, Van Bredekoff, you blew it, baby. You should have made the
Well,
move."
no, he blew it in Game 5. The
Okay,
Lakers in Game 5 at the Forum I believe they had a 17-point lead with 2 minutes, 3 minutes to go. He
that's
left
you
Jerry, never
can't
took
blow that.
Jerry out, and Jerry bad hamstring pull,
Right.
bad. He could not play defense. But a guy today would have been out for probably a month.
Exactly.
Jerry being Jerry, he took the cortisone shots and he played in Game 6, which he should have never done. And of course, they lost that, and they came back in Game 7. And Jerry was brilliant. He was named the MVP of the series, but he could not play his usual very high standard defense. And Sam Jones had a big Game 7. They would go, when you have a hamstring, you get all the cortisone you want, but you can't move like you usually can. The pain's not there. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was in
And
the
that
Game
game, and
7.
that Game 7 is the one that ended up with the lucky shot of all time by Don Nelson that bounced,
Yeah,
as
a
Elgin
funny
once told
shot.
me. He said it bounced and hit the clouds, came down, and then went through the basket.
What people forget about that Game 7 is that Wilt Chamberlain in the first half was awful. It was like he was in a fog. He really was. Bill Russell completely outplayed him. I think they had a 16 or 18-point lead at halftime. They were
Yep.
dominating the game. And they put Mel Counts in. They had a pretty good run, later in the game. And Van Bredekoff and Wilt did not get along. And he did not. And when Wilt took himself out of the game, and obviously he was hurt, he wouldn't take himself out.
Right.
And he wanted to go back in the last 5 minutes. But I never blamed Van Bredekoff for that. I blamed him for Game 5. I think he
Okay.
cost him the championship. Because if Jerry was healthy, there's no way that team could beat the Lakers.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was tough. I mean, that was the famous balloons game where Jack Hancock had all the balloons up at the top of the Forum ready to celebrate. And I guess there was a memo that went out pregame. Did you know about that at all?
No, I didn't. To be very honest with you, I found out obviously after the game.
Yeah,
I found
right,
out.
right.
But I did not know beforehand. No, I did not
I guess
know.
it was the kind of thing where Auerbach found out. He told Bill Russell. They told the team, and they say, "There's no damn way they're celebrating. I don't care what floor they're on."
And the Celtics, albeit they finished 4th in the Eastern Division that year, and they beat the Baltimore Bullets and the Knicks on the way to the championship series.
Yep.
But they still had some pretty darn good players. They had John Havlicek, Larry Siegfried, Bill Russell.
Right.
I
The thing was that they were older at the time, and the
Yeah.
Lakers had the nucleus to get it done, and they didn't.
Absolutely.
And they did not
Absolutely.
get it done.
If Jerry hadn't got hurt, and also Sam Jones in game, I believe it was game 4. Remember, the Lakers went back there up 2-0. In game 4, Jones hit that shot. They were down by 1 point with 1 second to go, but he walked, and he also was out of bounds. Today, it would have been a challenge, and he was out of bounds when he shot from the side.
Exactly.
And he walked like you can't believe. And they let it go. But, in the ball, you talk about a lucky shot. Jones's shot was very lucky, too. They would have had a 3-game lead, and the series would have been over.
Yeah, remember, they always had a 6-man. It was called a leprechaun. So there's nothing the Lakers could do in those days. As well as you knew Jerry West, let's talk about your friend, Jerry West, who we just lost recently. As good a guy, forget the superstar and all that kind, just a good guy with a great heart. And Jerry was snake bit his entire playing career by the Celtics until they finally won it. What do you remember Jerry being like in those days, not being able to handle, like, am I ever going to win a damn title?
It was tough on him. It was tough.
Very.
I mean, after that game 7, he just had his head down. And I wrote basically almost my whole column on that. I obviously wrote about Wilt and VBK.
Sure.
But Jerry being the MVP was a good story, too. That never should have happened. That hamstring pull, he should have been out of the game. What was the end of the game for? They had a 17-point lead. But, yes, it bothered Jerry. He hated the color green.
Yeah.
And, they beat him, I believe, 7 times. And that's a lot of times to lose to one team.
Yes. And explain to people, separate from the Wilt season in 69, here's how I tell everybody. I say the Lakers were not as good as the Celtics every time, except for 69. They were not as good.
No, they had Bill Russell. They had Tommy
exactly.
Heinsohn.
And that was an era, if you didn't have a great center, you were not going to win. And Darryl Imhoff was fine, but he wasn't Bill Russell. And Leroy Ellis was fine, but they were not championship.
No, he was Bill Russell. Ironically, you like this stat. In 1962, the first time I ever saw the Lakers in person play, I came down for game 6 at the sports arena. The Lakers, after Elgin, I believe, scored 60 or 62 points against them to go up 3-2, and they were up 3-2. So I came down from Fresno with my fraternity brother, a guy named Joe Monis, and we went to Murray's Pharmacy at the corner of, it was Figueroa. I believe it was Figueroa and Santa Barbara. It was Martin Luther King Boulevard now, but it was Santa Barbara Boulevard in those days. And I bought 2 tickets for $20 at the top of the arena. That was a big game. They were going to win the world championship.
Right, exactly.
And after the first half, they were hot. They came out. Unfortunately, Fred Schaus had this crazy thing, automatic after 7 minutes or something. He would always take Jerry and Elgin out twice in the first half and twice in the second. And when he took out, Jerry couldn't miss a shot in the first half.
That's Freddie Schaus.
He took him out. Yeah, he took him out, and Elgin and Jerry were never the same the second half. They should have played way more. Jerry's a young kid. He was 23
right,
years.
exactly.
I mean, he was about 27 at the time, I believe.
Okay.
No, 1962. No, he was like 23.
No, he was like 23 or 4, maybe.
He was 27. Yeah.
Right.
And Bill Russell and Sam Jones took over the second half. And guess what? This really dates me. Yes, the Lakers made the traditional last-second comeback, and they were within 4 points with about a minute and a half to go. And guess who hit the cincher? Bob Cousy, set shot at the top of the key, way out. Bob Cousy. I actually saw Bob Cousy play, which really goes down.
Yeah.
I saw Stan Musial play in Los Angeles. You saw Stan Musial play in 59.
At the end of the last year of his career, I saw him play.
I saw him, yeah.
Yeah, so let's again a little more on Jerry the man, okay? Losing him recently, how did that affect you? And I mean, he's just such a special guy. It's absolutely impossible to believe he's not with us anymore.
No, it is. It really is. I took it. Obviously, he was one of my literally, he was one of my closest friends. We would go out to dinner, 4 or 5 times a year. It was like standard. And Jerry was very loyal to me. I'll tell you how loyal he was to me.
What's that?
He came to my retirement party. He came to my wedding when I married Jillian, a young lady from England. He came to her funeral out in Lake. We had a church in Lakewood. He was very, very good to me. He'd always show up if I needed him for anything. He would, and we would talk at least once or twice a month. I didn't overdo it with him because so many people. But he was the most natural guy. When we'd go out, I'd take him, to Phil Trainees or a place called the Dalray and different places. I took him, and he'd be nice to everyone. He was always nice to everybody. Jerry would never shun anyone when it came to, and he never, ever, ever took himself serious.
Yeah.
Great guy.
No, I miss Jerry, and there I am with Elgin as well. And Elgin was my guy, and I wrote a whole chapter about him in my book. What was it like traveling with Elgin, who I guess in those days they called him Motor Mouth?
He beat me almost every time we played gin rummy. He was a great gin rummy.
I heard he loved playing Chick because he said Chick always thought he was going to beat him, and he hardly ever beat him, right?
Yeah. Well, Elgin was great, not a good one, a great one. He beat me all the time. And Hot Rod Hundley, I would beat Hot Rod, but he'd keep me up all night. And we'd pay for money, $10 a game or something. That back in those days, had a lot of money.
Right.
Rod would keep me up to 5 a.m, and of course he would be drinking. I wouldn't be, and he was real character, Rod Hundley, in those days.
Oh, totally. What was your relationship with Wilt Chamberlain here in this?
We were very, very close. I would go to dinner with him many times. New York, he invited. He liked me. And we were close. And unfortunately, the last 10 years of our relationship, we didn't talk to each other. I used to try to get him on. I'd talk to him. And he would not come down to the studio when I was on doing talk radio.
Yeah, Will would you call him moody? He got in different moods, and it was just
he got mad at me because he said it was. I wrote every year. I wrote Will making fun of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it was an annual column in the Herald Examiner.
Okay.
I did it for like 8-9 years in a row. Last year, he said it was off the record. And of course, nothing was off the record. And I think it was his agent, Cy Goldberg, who told him, you can't talk to that guy anymore. And he would not talk to me. Two guys who are very close to, Carol Rosenblum and Wilt Chamberlain, refused to talk to me at the end.
Wow. So you talk about literally the last 10 years of his life. You guys never spoke?
Not talk to me, as close as we were. And trust me when I tell you, he'd come down to my house. I'd take him. In fact, I would take him to a restaurant. Then it was in San Pedro. He'd come to my house in East Long. I was living in East Long Beach.
Wow.
And we'd go, in his Lamborghini and drive out to Phil Trainees, the Trainee Brothers restaurant on San Pedro.
I loved his I remember that Lamborghini.
Yeah.
He used to drive up to the front of the Forum Club entrance with that thing, and he would just stick his head out, and everybody would just come running over to his car.
One of the great times I had with players, one time Jerry came down with Rudy LaRusso and Rod Hundley, and I had this big Lincoln, a big car. We all got into it and went out to the Trainees, and we started hitting a couple bars, the Run Runner out in Seal Beach, and we hit Fritz That's It, a gentleman's club out in Bellflower. It was more fun. I mean, when Jerry, you'll love this one. When Jerry, we all went in, there was a big long line. Oh, you can't come in here. And I said, I knew the owner, a guy named John Morrison. I said, let me talk to him. And John Morrison comes. I said, Jerry West, what are you guys doing? That's Jerry West. And we stayed in that place.
Come on.
Well, it got to, people were going crazy. We had to get out of it.
No, I get it.
It was a very well-known gentleman.
Yeah, it was like having Elvis with you from a sports standpoint.
It was.
Yeah, exactly. I want to show you this picture. It's one of my favorite pictures that was taken a couple of years ago at the Sportscaster. You see that little thing that we have in my hand there with Jerry?
Yeah.
That is literally a piece of the sports arena. Remember the top of it was bluish gray, And
Yeah.
I went there when they were demolishing it, and I took a couple of pieces because I was there so many times
Wow.
just as a memory piece. And I had Elgin, Jerry, and Tommy Hawkins sign it.
Oh, that's great.
It's
Yeah.
like, our first home. What a great memory, and whatever they wrote. And so that's Jerry after he was the last guy to sign it for me. And he says, "Wow, that's actually a piece of the sports arena." I said, "Yep, isn't that crazy?" Anyway, it's a fun
That's
little
great. Well,
piece.
hey, I got a piece of the Berlin Wall. So.
Yes, yeah, we're gonna
That's the
and
only
we're gonna
piece I have.
literally a piece of the Berlin Wall, huh?
Yeah, I was there when it opened. Yeah, we'll talk about
Okay,
that.
we're gonna get to that in a second. Who's this guy?
Yeah, that's when I was young, and in fact, my sister sent me a picture of
Okay,
myself when I weighed 214 pounds. Believe me, at one time, obviously I weigh 165 now, and I'm 81 years old. That's when I think I was 21, had a big hunk of hair.
yeah, you
At
couldn't be
that
any
time, I
older
weighed
than.
about 195,
There's no
but
way you're
I
older
was a
than 20.
big
You look like you're
weightlifter.
15 there.
Yeah, no, I was a young guy, and they always said I kind of looked like James Dean, a big James Dean, and I had to,
Right.
yeah.
By the way, here's that great shot with Wilt here, like you
How'd you
ready to
get that?
punch.
Oh, that was in the book. Yeah, you got that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got
That
I
was
got a bunch of.
taken. We were judges at the Raider cheerleading contest at the
Oh,
Coliseum, and
okay.
that was taken. And I had a buddy there who was a big weightlifter, and I says, "Hey, Wilt, this guy's gonna kick your butt." He said, "I'll sick my dogs on that guy."
That's funny. What do you recall about Wilt? Was it? I think it was Wilt wanted to face Muhammad Ali,
He
and
would
they
have
ended
been
up
knocked out if, and I'm serious on this, since boxing is really, or I'm in two boxing Hall of Fame. I covered
exactly. I wanted
5,000
to talk
fights in
about
my
that.
life,
Yeah.
but he would have been knocked out. I literally in less than 15, 20 seconds if he wanted to. He wouldn't know. I mean, he'd go like this and this and this, boom, and hit him with a hook, and that would be it. I mean,
Even with the height difference though to
I
get
don't
up
care about
there.
the height. That would have been nothing. He'd have got
Really?
inside him. Ali was so quick. He's not a big puncher, but that's
Right.
all relative. He's still a professional fighter. He hits very hard. I mean, he knocked out Oscar Bonavino. He knocked out a guy named George Foreman. I mean, I know he was tired and everything, but
Right.
no, that's an absolute joke. Just like Mike Tyson and that Paul. Tyson will get himself knocked out and probably within a minute if the guy wants to knock him out. It was
Yeah.
like McGregor. Mayweather would have knocked out McGregor in the first round, and he told Dana White, "I'm going to, I'll let him go for 7, 8 rounds, and
Right.
I'll stop."
Right. Exactly.
You can't do
Okay.
it. They're professional fighters at that level. That's a different level. You're
No, it
talking a
makes
different
sense.
level there.
Okay, here's your picture by the Berlin Wall, right?
Berlin
What?
Wall,
Okay,
November.
describe this.
That was taken on November the 10th or 11th. It opened on November 9th. We were in Munich. Those two guys on the left are old ticket guys, Doug Knittel and Gilbert Eschon. And we were over there. Those guys were doing something with the World Cup in Rome. And then we went to Munich, and we're looking at it. They're opening up the wall. Let's go to. So we went down the Autobahn. And let me tell you something. On that Autobahn, for 100 miles, there were cars on the other side coming from East Germany. They opened it up, and it was so crowded, and our side was pretty crowded too. I got out of the car and went over there and shook hands with some East German people. We
Wow.
went through Checkpoint Charlie that night, and then we got in. Somehow we got in a hotel over there because everything was jammed. Berlin was just filled with people. And we went down to the Berlin Wall, and they were selling hammers and stuff. And I shook hands. I got pictures of myself. I should have sent it with East German guards on top of the wall.
Oh wow.
It was amazing. It was just amazing. Especially the next day, they said over 1 million East Germans came into West Germany.
I mean, it's as
West
historic
Berlin.
as anything in the history of that area.
Yeah, it was. Well, that was the opening of that was the death of communism in Europe.
Exactly. Was it a coincidence that you were there, or you planned this?
Yeah. Well, the reason I know these guys, 7 days earlier on November 2nd, Harold Examiner folded. And I had 2 weeks off before I went to work for 2 or 3. I think I got 3 weeks off before I went to work for the Press Telegram.
Oh,
And
okay.
I knew this Knittel. Just you see these guys all the time at the games, and we just became friends. And I'd see them at boxing, especially at boxing matches all the time.
Right.
They were always around. Okay. And they said, "Why don't you come to Europe with us?" And I'd never been to
Oh,
Europe,
oh, that was the first of the
It was a
58 trips.
58 trips. This year would be the 59th.
But who's counting?
So I went there and I became instantly a Europhile. And to this day,
Yeah, I
every
love it.
single year I go to Paris and I go to Berlin every year.
Yeah,
I'll spend eight
it's
days
so
in
great.
Berlin this year and 7 days in Paris. I always go to Paris. I end my trip at Paris, which is fantastic. I get a kick at all these people discovering Paris.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like it's a new city or something.
Yeah, Florence. We always wind up in Florence, and I
Yeah,
like Rome.
Florence
This
is
year I'm going to
phenomenal.
be in Rome for 8 days. Yeah, it's
I
great.
absolutely love it. All
Yeah.
right, so let's talk about how the writer ended up getting into broadcasting of all things. And there you are with Big Joe McDonnell at one. I guess that was one of your first gigs, ESPN 1110, which
Yes.
I don't even remember.
I hold a very unique distinction in broadcasting. I got fired 4 different times. No big thing.
Right.
But one of the times I got fired at theater happened before I went to work for KMPC. Remember when we started Sports
course.
Talk over there, and they hired me, and all of a sudden Joe calls and they're going to hire Todd Christensen. They want him to work with me. Well, we all know
But
how that
he
works.
was one tough dude to deal with.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yeah, he was a
So
bad guy.
they fired me, and I'm having dinner with the late Van Barbieri, who you knew. Remember, he used to be the publicist at the Olympic Auditorium.
Yep.
Good guy. And a guy named Don Kramer, another crazy ticket guy. For some reason, I like goofy characters, and believe it. This guy was really a crazy guy. Bet a guy he couldn't walk from downtown to Hilton downtown in L.A. to Long Beach. He bet a guy he couldn't walk 28 miles, and he did it, and he won $500 or something. Okay.
Wow.
Anyway, I got fired, and we went to lunch that day, and this Kramer says, "Well, why don't you just go to Europe?" I says, "That's a good idea." And by that time, I'd been going, quite a bit, and I call up my travel. Those days, I used to get buddy passes from a guy that worked at Delta. So, make a long story short, I went to Europe that day after to get over the fact that I got fired. And ironically, that week I met my future wife at a train station in Crystal Palace in South London.
Okay. Another great example of how life is timing, huh?
I got fired and I wound up in England. I'd never been to England. It was interesting. I found it very interesting. Wild.
So how did you end up doing radio with Joe? There you are with Joe.
Yeah, Joe liked me. I'd gone on a couple of times with Scott St. James. We did a show one time over. Remember Scott?
Of course.
Out of curiosity, is he still living?
No, he passed away a few years ago. I used to fill in for him when he was either sick or on vacation at our KMPC
sorry
days.
To hear that. Yeah. He's I was with Van Arrow Wright on Arliss, a show of Arliss. But anyway, Joe and I used to get in arguments in the forum offices. Joe, and I'd say one thing, "Oh, you're crazy." and he wanted me to. I came on with him on that his Sunday night show on KFI. Remember that he used to be on.
Of course.
And he'd have me on, and he says, "Look, I'm going to start. I think you and I would do well together," and that's how it all started. And I went down and did a few shows with him when Scott St. James was on vacation.
Okay.
Remember, Scott was doing a sports show down there at KMBC.
Yep.
And we took his place, and Scott said that was the most embarrassing shows ever. And they were, but we were crazy, and they liked it. We got a great reaction.
Why embarrassing? You guys were having fun.
I know, but we were nuts. We were
whatever.
We were trying to. Well, I don't know, but it was.
But it was you versus Joe. Your opinions were obviously opposite often, right?
Many times.
And that's what made the show. Because if you thought the same, it would have been boring as hell.
People used to always say, "How do you take it, Joe?" And I says, "I love Joe. He's Joe. You can't take him too seriously." Although one time, he got on me at a time when my wife was about 2 weeks away from passing away. I wasn't in a very good mood. And I went in there. I said, Joe, don't be saying that now. And he started crying. Now, Joe had a soft heart. He really did, a big heart. And I love him and I miss him.
Yeah, but it was it literally though, like just first two times you were a guest on his show and you said, you know what, there's a little bit of chemistry here that we can work with.
I never thought of doing radio ever.
No, no,
Never
no, but
thought.
that's what Joe thought, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Originally
he did that.
from having you as a guest, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's where it started. And of course, I
McDonnell
got
Douglas.
you'll like this one. The first time I got fired, I was doing a movie called Cobb, and
Yeah, I remember that.
I missed the program director. I can't remember his name. Gave me the permission to have the day off, so I missed a commercial thing. Auto, you go out and remember those commercial auto things. You had to go be part of it.
Yes.
I don't know, and I missed it, and so I got fired. Me and my partner, what's his name, Brian Golden, at that time.
Yep.
I wasn't with Joe at that time,
for a
and
long
I got fired.
Yep. Yep.
And, they fired me the first time. The second time they fired me, they didn't want to renew my contract because they have to give me too much money. But they brought me back 2 months later at the same. I was still making more money there than I did as a journalist. That's for sure.
That's amazing.
As you know.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk some boxing here because that's your expertise, Mr. Hall of Famer. Here you are with Sugar Ray Leonard.
That's a good right hand, wasn't it? Look at that right hand.
Yeah, he obviously wasn't too worried. He's still laughing.
No.
Were you a boxing fan your whole life, or was this something that evolved?
Huge boxing fan. And the Herald was made for me because boxing, that was my first beat at the LA Examiner was boxing. That's where I knew Van Barberi was the PR guy there.
Yep.
And I knew all the boxers. And, I saw the great Mondo Ramos and Sugar Ramos fight there, one of the best fights I've ever seen. I'm not kidding you. You're probably say, Doug, I probably in my life seen anywhere between 3,500 and 5,000 fights. I mean, I saw 322 amateur fights at the 84 Olympics at the Sports Arena. I covered every big fight during the 80s and 90s in Vegas and New York and Miami, Arguello and Pryor. I covered an awful lot of fights, all the Leonard fights, the Hearns fights, all of them, every one.
All right, so give us a couple of your favorite fighting stories of being around these guys or at a fight, whatever the hell it was.
Well, there's a couple of ones. Okay. One, every time I wrote a very lyrical mood piece on a guy named Mike Tyson after he lost the box off and didn't make the Olympics in 1984 at the box office in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And Custio Amato and Jimmy Jacobs loved to call him in the Herald. The Herald was over. And I got to know, and I covered all of Mike's fights. So later, and I boxed a little bit, but believe me, it was just a little bit. My trainer was a guy named Noe Cruz who trained Carlos Palomino. But anyway, I would see Mike Tyson, let's say at the hallway or walking at the Caesar's Palace, and I'd always show him. I said, "What do you think of that left hook? What do you think of that?" And he says, "I'll kick your MF ass, man." He always used to say that. About 5 times I'd say, because every time I'd see him, I'd duck down. I said, "What do you think of that left hook?" And he always, "I'll kick you."
I'm not impressed, Doug.
And Ray Leonard I was very close with Ray. He gave me the exclusive. Remember, he was retired, and I got the exclusive that he was coming back to fight Marvin Hagler. He hadn't fought 3 years.
Wow.
He was a great fighter. Everyone that saw him, the two best fighters I personally have seen in their primes were a guy named Jose Mantequilla Nápoles. He lived in Mexico. He was from Cuba. Great fighter. And Ray Leonard. Ray Leonard, had he not messed up the eye and was out for 3 years, would have gone down probably with Sugar Ray Robinson, the greatest fighter ever. He's a great fighter. I was in Montreal when he fought Duran. He fought Duran's fight that. He was a young kid then, and he fought his fight, and he lost by 1 or 2 points. But what people forget about that fight, he stood there toe-to-toe. In the last 3 rounds, he won all 3 rounds. He beat him, and Duran played to the crowd, and you saw what happened. He made Duran quit 6 months later in New Orleans. I was at that fight. He made him quit. He embarrassed him.
Exactly.
He's a great fighter.
Okay, well, there are a lot of great fighters, but the guy in this picture would say, I don't give a damn about any of them. I'm the greatest. I
Greatest
am
ever
the greatest.
no doubt about it. He
Okay,
was
so why is there
never,
no doubt about it? You tell us why.
because of his quickness. No heavyweight was ever that quick, and plus he proved it. I mean, his toughness when he came back from his problems with the government. Remember,
Yep, of course.
he's gone for about 3 4 years.
Yep.
He was never the lightning quick heavyweight he was when he would stop Cleveland Williams and Zorro Foley and Ernie Terrell and Floyd Patterson, Archie Moore, of course, were guys. But he was fighting. He was so quick, and Liston, of course.
Yeah.
You know, he was so quick. I mean, Liston could never beat him. He was quick, but he like Ray Leonard. The first thing I want to know about a boxer: do you have a heart? No one thought Leonard could stand up to. He took Leonard's. Hearns was undefeated. You know, they were both undefeated.
Yeah.
And he took his punches, and of course, wound up knocking him out in the 13th round. And the same thing with Ali. Look how tough. I mean, it probably led to his, Parkinson's disease or syndrome, or what. He had a very,
too many punches, right?
And I'm sure he could take punches. Ernie Shavers, no one ever knocked him down. I mean, other than Frazier, I think maybe Trevor Berbick did in Bahamas. I don't know, but I didn't pay attention to that fight. That was after
right.
But he was tough. Even when he came back, he was never the same fighter. And if you ever look at that 15 round with one of my all-time favorite fighters, Joe Frazier, I mean, Joe beat the heck.
Oh yeah, that was
it was vicious. Joe won the fight, but my God, after Joe hit him with a hook and knocked him down in the 14th round, he still got up that round. Right. At the end of the round, he was punching Joe.
Do you agree with me though, Doug, that I think that fight was like the one deal that really changed Muhammad Ali's life? He got pounded so much. There's no way he could have ever been the same after
people know he wasn't the same, but it's a testimony of his greatness.
Oh, yes.
He came back and still won the championship.
Right.
And stopped George Foreman and Zaire. There are a lot of reasons for that. George, right. When they canceled the fight to begin, or postponed it, I should say, George was never in shape. And, he knocked him out, but I know he knocked him out not because he hurt him. He just couldn't breathe anymore.
Right.
And George pounded him. And then he fought guys like Ernie Shavers and Ron Lyle. He fought all these tough guys that got hit.
Yeah.
And it was too much it was just too much for Ali. But Ali is definitely the best heavyweight ever. There's no doubt about that. Whether he's the best fighter, some people say Ray Robinson, and I saw. Only time I saw Ray in person, I saw him on TV playing when I was a young kid, was at this Main Street gym.
Yeah.
And you'd see him he was about 54, 55 years old. He just hit those speed bags. My gosh. People
really?
Say, who's that old man? And he'd knock you out in a second. Just like Jack Dempsey when he was 72, knocked out two muggers that tried to mug him on nearest restaurant.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine? They made a mistake.
Oh yeah, you're big time. Do you have one standout Ali story, a personal story at all?
Oh boy. Well, the ones I know, I really can't tell you.
What can you tell me? Come on, give us something. Give us something.
Oh gosh, Ali was very slick with women. Let's put it that way. He was very slick. That's all I'll say about it.
Okay, but anything specific separate from the women part,
what he used to do, I'll tell you. He said, "Hey, man, did you call me boy or did you call me Roy? What did you call me?" And he'd flick your ear like when I was in the Forum press lounge. He'd come in there,
the Forum Club,
and he'd flip my ear all the time. And I looked, who's doing that? It was Ali. And he was also he loved being a magician, and he'd play these games. But as far as I'm trying to think what crazy thing I know this much.
Yes.
When O.J. Simpson was around him, O.J. would get away from him because O.J. at one time was one of the most popular people in America, as we all know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially after he gained the 2,000 yards and all that stuff. and he would get away from Ali, because Ali, when you were around Ali, you were around a lot of people. I'd be around him, and my God, it was unbelievable.
Oh, I'm
He
sure.
was probably the most well-known human being in the world, and I'm talking, I don't care who you are.
Oh, they
Everyone
used to
knew
talk
Ali.
about it. Didn't matter where you were on the planet, he was known.
Oh, he was famous.
Right.
And I was at his. I did a show with Scott St. James from his house in Hancock Park. I was there for 2 hours, and I'm trying to think just some unique stories. It'll probably come to me, but there were, you know, I
Well,
haven't.
talk about his playfulness, though. When you're with him privately, the
Oh
kind of
God, he was a character. He was funny. He would just go up to people, and he, he was the most likable guy. You talk about people who I met that are most memorable. He would be one. Lasorda, of course, has to be up there too. Lasorda was
right.
a real character.
Yeah.
I met a lot of characters over the years.
Oh, that's for damn sure. And let's talk about Tommy, because uh, I don't know what to say about the guy, but he's uh, this I'll get Tommy in a second here. Hold on a second.
That's
But
my
to
mother.
talk about there's Lasorda right there with this picture with you and Lasorda and Frank Sinatra and
Yeah,
Alan
that's
Malamud in the
yeah.
background. What's
From
that
left to
baby all
right,
about?
that's Sinatra, Jack Disney, sports writer. You knew
Okay.
Jack. Alan Malamud, of course, I worked with Alan, talked to him every morning of the week when he'd read his column to me when he was at the Herald and at the Times. Pam King, she was a writer, a very good writer at the Herald. Me, and then was sort of
Tommy.
some, you know.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the first three people there, and four of the people in that picture have passed away. Jack Disney, Alan, and
Right.
Sinatra, and Tommy.
Do you remember what the circumstances were of this picture? Because I know Frank wasn't there a lot, but he showed up at Tommy's office
Yeah, he
occasionally.
was. I can't. He was just there. Rickles used to be there more.
Yeah, exactly.
And Rickles, I did several columns, live columns where I'd write down all the stuff he said. I'd have to call him at his house. I knew Don very well.
Oh, you did the column from his house?
No.
Oh.
I would call him up to make sure I got all the lines right. He's going so quick, I can only write so fast.
Right.
I mean, he was. I loved his show at the Sahara. I used to go there all the time.
Oh,
and he'd
yeah,
have me back
absolutely.
afterwards with his wife Barbara. I have a date. I never forget when I went to the press television. He says, "This guy, I knew him when he was big time at the Herald. He's at some paper in Long Beach now." He ripped the hell out of me, and that was, he loved me. He was very nice. He was very nice to me.
That's
Every
great.
time. I probably saw 20, 25 of his shows over the years.
All right, what's your favorite Lasorda story?
Oh boy.
or 10 of them. No, we don't have time for
so
10.
Many of them. Well, I asked him one time, between the Lakers, the Dodgers had lost 2 games in New York. They came back for game. You remember that Friday night game?
Yeah.
And I believe Yeager hit a home run or something. They went 10 innings in Venezuela. There was an off day, and I went out there, and I said, "What do you think of this guy at the New York Post?" He was called the Nose.
Oh, you're the one who talked about that?
Yes, I'm the one that asked the question.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
The Nose. Do you remember the Nose?
Of course, I remember the whole rant.
Who is that? He went wild.
I played that on my Healy show.
Oh, you did? I gotta watch that. Because that one's been overlooked. We all know about Kingman, but the Nose is pretty good too. Yeah. And
the effing Nose. You tell the effing Nose if he wants this and that. Yeah, it was unbelievable.
I wrote one of my funniest columns ever. We were in Vegas. Can't remember. Oh, I was in there to cover the Tyson Joe Frazier Jr. fight. And I was with Steve Brenner and Bill Kaplan, Tommy Lasorda, and it was all about Tommy and his entourage. And we were all together. I wrote the funniest column. We went with Tommy. Well, we followed Tommy. Everything was free. We went to the Palace Court free.
Well, it had to be free because he wasn't going to pay for anything, as you know.
What's that?
I said it had to be free because he wasn't going to pay for anything.
No. There was I will not mention it, but there was a time, well-known restaurateur, I don't want to mention any names here.
Okay.
You had a dinner at this place, He says, I don't pay. He told the owner, he says, you might not pay in Italian places, but you got to pay in this place. And
Oh,
poor Joey Amalfitano had to pay the bill.
oh God.
I wasn't with him that time, but I heard that story.
That is
Well,
amazing.
you could go one story after another with Tommy. I mean, it was just so many things. He was just funny.
Well, we're going to talk a game story about Tommy right now, because this picture right here is him looking out to the mound, trying to decide, what do I do in the 1985 NLCS? Do I bring in Tom Niedenfuhr in the ninth inning against the St. Louis Cardinals? We talked about this the other day. Okay, let's talk about it. There's Niedenfuhr and Sosha as they discuss whether or not to pitch to Jack effing Clark.
There was runners at second. Here was the thing. It was 5-4 in favor of the Dodgers. If they went to the ninth inning, won the game, they would have won the next game because they had Fernando Valenzuela.
Right now, and tell everybody where you were.
Touch Fernando. They could not.
Tell everybody where you were, Doug. You were by the field watching this. It was the ninth inning,
the tunnel, right? You know, the tunnel downstairs with Lyle Spencer next to Lyle, and I kept saying to Lyle, okay, it was running to second, third. I says, why aren't they walking? Why aren't they walking Jack Clark? Jack Clark that year was the #1 slugger in the National League. He really was. I think he led the league in home runs or whatever he did. He was a powerful right-handed hitter.
Yep.
And Niedenfuhr, the last month of that season was just garbage. He was terrible. And you had Jerry Royce warming up in the bullpen. Okay, there was an open base. You walk him. The next hitter was a rookie named Andy Van Slyke. And, of course, Tommy would have brought in Royce to pitch to a left-handed hitter.
Right.
And I'm sure that Whitey Herzog or whoever was coaching, who was it? Whitey Herzog.
I think it was Whitey. I think so.
Yeah. Would have brought in the only pinch hitter he had left on his bench, a right-handed rookie catcher named, light hitting hitter, guy named Steve Lake. And like Royce said, I would have gotten, whether they left Van Slyke, he said, there's no way. And Royce was a tough, as you know, Jerry was a tough guy.
Oh, yeah.
And had a good year that year. He leaves in Niedenfuhr, and we all know what the loudest sound of a home run I've ever heard in my life. And
there it is. You see that swing? Now you can hear the ball coming off the bat.
Guerrero did not move an inch. Didn't look back. Don't you remember Pedro was in left field?
It's the fastest ball I've ever seen go from home plate to the stands ever and since.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how my ears were ringing. I was right in the first row above the press box behind home plate with my buddy TJ Riley. We played ball together, and we looked at each other like, I can't believe we pitched to this guy, and that was ridiculous how hard he hit that.
3-run homer.
Yep.
There was no reason to pitch to this day. I don't understand it.
Here it is. Here's the pitch.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yep. I was prepared for you, Doug.
Yeah, you're right. And then afterwards,
there's the celebration.
Oh, yeah, that brings back memories.
So
I'll never forget. They knew they won. I mean, who was their reliever? They had a good reliever, whoever it was.
I can't remember. Was it Bruce Sutter? I don't remember. Was it Bruce Sutter? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway. What do you recall Tommy's opinion of his own performance?
When I went in the office, I think do you have the picture of me being in the office? I think I was in that office.
I have to look for it.
Yeah, well, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I went in the office and talked to him. I said, Tommy, why did you pitch to him? And he got kind of mad, and he says, he just kept shaking his head. He said, he put the pitch right where I don't want him to pitch it. He put it, middle, right down the middle. Yeah. That wasn't supposed to be, but he was very, very, whether he was worn out or whatever, Niedenfuhr should not have been pitching to Jack Clark. He should not, especially with first base open in a 1-run lead. And you had Jerry Royce. There I am.
That's the picture in your office.
I can't believe it. Yeah, office. It wasn't. I mean, he was not his jovial self that. And I asked him a question, do you regret pitching him? He said, I don't know. Maybe I should.
I don't know.
I mean, what happened is it's easy to say after he hit the home run. He's been my guy all year. But that was one time he should have known what he had done. Do you recall Niedenfuhr the last couple of weeks was bad? He was
Oh, I
really
remember we were looking, me and my buddy TJ are looking at each other like, well, I don't know. I guess they're bringing him in, but you got to walk this guy. Why would you bring him in to walk somebody? It all made no sense. And, everybody could be a Monday morning quarterback, but
yeah,
that
of
was
course.
just an awful, awful decision
Awful,
at the
just an
time.
awful mood. You don't pitch to Jack Clark,
Yep.
especially if you're a pitcher like Niedenfuhr. Your junk pitcher, maybe, yeah, but and
And the
Jerry
next
Royce.
And the next worst move by the Dodgers was bringing in Jack Clark as a hitting instructor when I couldn't believe that when they did that. It's like, of all people, that guy?
That's funny. That is
Yeah,
funny.
I'll never
Yeah,
forget that either. I even
that's
said something
funny.
to him like, do you really feel stupid wearing that uniform or not?
Yeah, that's something that is very sad. I mean, because they
Yep,
shouldn't. I think they would have won the game and won the series. That it remains to be seen because
of
for
course.
Fernando in Game 7, I'll take my chances, and so would you.
Right, exactly. So give us one of your favorite Dodger Stadium stories, and then we got to go to the Rams quickly.
Yeah, favorite Dodger Stadium story. Well, what is your favorite Dodger Stadium? Well, I could tell you two of them. I
Maybe
could
the
tell you
Kirk
two.
Gibson
It's
home
the
run.
only time that I put my fist up. Steve Sachs caught me in Tommy's locker, and I wrote something. They were on strike. This would have been, I don't know, they were on, and I wrote what these guys would do. And I wrote that Steve, each guy in my column was on
Oh,
page one
okay.
of the Herald,
Right.
what profession had been. And I said Steve Sachs would be a gas attendant, gas station.
Oh,
And he said, "You never." It's the only time I mean it. I put up my. I thought he was going to hit me.
so he got into your face.
I have to admit, I was a little scared because Steve Sachs would have kicked my butt, and I know that.
By the way, I talked to Steve the other day at the alumni game, and he said he was going to come on this show. So now I'm going to have to ask him what he
Ask him
remembers.
about. He'll get a kick. Oh, we laugh about it now.
I would hope.
And
What was the other story?
One story. What other story? I could tell
Well,
you.
you got a Gibson. You got the Gibson home run
Roberto
story.
Clemente got mad at me one time. This is back
Really?
in 19. I think it was 68. I
Okay.
asked him, "What do you think of people that say you get hurt too much?" Oh God, did he get mad? Remember, Roberto used to always have pain. He'd play, but he would always have pains. He got mad at me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did he give you a quote, or he walked
Yeah,
away?
he gave me a couple quotes. I can't. That's so Stevie. I mean, Teddy. That's. I'm trying to think who else. Belcher got very mad at me one time.
Tim Belcher?
Yeah, I wrote something. He says, "You don't ever question my heart," and this and that. He apologized later on. Actually, I stood up to him because he's so big. I know he wasn't going to hit me. This is when I'm older. When I was very younger, I like when Steve. If I was young in my 20s or 30s, I wouldn't have been. I don't think I'd have been scared. Not at all.
No, I get it.
I was older then.
So tell us what was going on in your mind. You were at the Gibson home run game.
Well, two things. I'm sitting next to Jim Murray, and we both wrote our columns. I finished my column. It was late at night. You've got to remember, it was around, I think it was around 10:15. The deadline was 10:30 or something like that. Maybe 10 to 10, whatever it was. I wrote the whole column. It was about the Dodgers. I remember Canseco hit that. I wrote about Canseco hitting the grand slam. I believe it was in the second inning or first inning. I think it was 4-0, I think.
I think you're right.
And then I looked at it. And to me, it looked like from where I was sitting, it didn't look like it was going out. It looked like just a high fly ball. And Jim Murray hit the not the desk, but the wood in front of you where we're sitting, and the press box. Yeah. And he hit it. He said, "Damn it!" I said, "That's
because he had to rewrite the story."
Jim already had finished. I hadn't finished.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's the killer.
And I had to bang it out. I mean, that's like the famous Mike Tyson when he bit Evander's. I had to write that story literally in 20 minutes. In 20 minutes to make the first edition. And I did it, but make all the editions then.
Yeah.
There were no second editions or third editions in those days as the newspaper business, as you know, changed slightly. But
Yeah.
that what I knew right then that the Dodgers were destined. I mean, I was in New York. The same thing happened with a guy named Mike Scioscia hitting the ninth inning homer to tie it up. Scioscia wasn't an home
Wasn't
run
that off
hitter.
of Gooden, wasn't it?
Yes, I think it was a 2-run homer to tie it up.
Yeah,
Wasn't it
yeah.
a 2-run homer? Wasn't it? I think it was
Right.
a 2-run homer. It was 1 out or 2 outs, but that game was over too. And I said, this team is destined. They're going to beat and the A's were really a good team.
Yeah,
They had everything. But they won in 5 games, as you well know.
exactly. All right, so you're very close to the Rams situation there with the ownerships and the coaches, and I joked that I was at the Rams preseason game last week. We'll be going on Saturday against the Chargers. This is my 50th year of being credentialed to Rams football, and my first year was Chuck Knox. What do you remember about Ground Chuck?
Yeah, well, I was his biggest critic, if you read the Herald. I mean, I liked him personally.
Yeah, I get it.
And we were personal
Too
friends.
conservative, though, right? Too conservative calling.
We had a big headline one time, and it was in the Herald. Come on, CMON. Come on, Chuck. Lighten up and open the offense or something. It was really a sarcastic headline.
Right,
big,
right.
Stripped across 8 columns,
Wow. Did he say anything to you personally about that?
To this day, Chuck cost him 2, God rest his soul. He was great, good coach, very solid coach.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be mad if he was enshrined in the Hall of Fame. He won everywhere he went. He won in Buffalo, won in Seattle.
Seattle, yeah.
He was a great coach. He did.
But
his conservatives, Rich saw one time. They were in Minneapolis, won the NFC Championship. They lost twice there, but the second time they lost there was ridiculous. They took the opening kickoff, and McCutcheon, I think it was Jim Bertelson and McCutcheon ran right down, it was Capoletti wasn't there yet, and just beat the hell out of the Vikings. Got down to according to Rich Saul, a half an inch from scoring. And I think Harold Jackson or one of their receivers. Who were the receivers then? It was Harold Jackson.
Jack Snow.
Yeah, Jack Snow. But they on a reverse, they gave him the ball and he scored. Today it would have gone in the end zone, but he stopped it at the 2-inch line, the 3-inch. He went for the field goal. We all know what Bobby Bryant did. We all know what Carl Eller did. He blocked it, and he went 100 yards down the field, 7-0, and they wound up winning 17-13. And I'll never forget behind me was Rosenblum and a guy named Don Klosterman, his general manager, pounded the desk. Bam! How could he? I mean, going for a field goal when you just dominate. You went right down in like 16 plays, went right through them, through like one pass, and they were dominating. And that took the heart out of him. And, I think it was Tarkenton that brought him back. And they went to the Super Bowl that year and, of course, lost like they always did. That was a very good Ram team. Very good Ram team.
Yeah, they had a bunch of good teams, but they just weren't good enough, or they made some bad decisions.
Too conservative. What about when he lost? That's what he got him fired. His last game, Bobby Lee was the quarterback for the Minneapolis. Bud Grant outcoached everyone.
Bob Lee was a backup quarterback, a career backup.
Wally Hildenberg said we were putting 9. He told me at the Super Bowl. I used that. We were faking it, acting like our linebackers would crunch in. We knew he was going to run on first down and second down every time. Wow. And sure enough, and it was raining. Don't you remember? It rained the second half. Pat Hayden's hands were too small to grip the football. Yeah. So Bobby Lee and Bud Grant opened it up. They went right down the field, passing on first down. They opened it up. They got 14 points on the scoreboard. They won 14-7. Yep. We had one of those torrential downpours the second half, and Hayden could not pass, and the mush and everything. I was really bad. Yeah. And he just, Pat was big enough, and the defense just kind of dominated the game, that rainy game. And within, I think it was 3 days after they fired Chuck, and to be in all honesty, he richly deserved it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He cost them, believe me, 2 Super Bowl appearances. There's
Yep.
no way those Vikings should have won that game. No way,
I know.
but they did.
All right. So talk about your relationship with the owners of the Rams.
Well, it was very good until my good friend, who was a good friend of mine, George Allen. I broke the story. He was coming to the Rams in the Herald.
Yeah.
I broke it in the Starlight edition. Do you remember the Starlight edition?
Yes, I do, actually.
Afternoon.
Yeah.
And I let off Jim Healy's. I let off his program that day. He had me on. That's a very unusual thing. I said, George.
Oh, yeah, that is very unusual.
Yeah. George Allen's coming to the Rams, and that was it. It was out by then,
So that would have been what, about 68?
And he got fired. It was an inside job by a lot of executives that didn't like him. I don't really want to mention their names, but there's, they passed away.
Well, George was not the easiest guy to work with. He was very
no, but you don't fire him after 2 exhibition games, please.
Wow.
And he was changing the culture.
Right.
And
right.
George was a great football coach. You could say a lot of things about him, but he was a great football coach. And the Rams would have been better. Believe me, they'd have played harder under him. He was tough. And the Rams had won so much under Chuck, and done things their own way under Chuck.
Yep.
And they became a little, I wouldn't say listless, but they needed a new voice in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Yep. A lot of guys turned against him, and Carroll listened to him.
Right. Well, let's move up a couple of decades after that, though, or at least a decade after that, anyway. When you had before the Rams moved out of town to St. Louis, you had the Carroll Rosenblum / Georgia era. I mean, how did that come about in your mind?
Well, it was a shocker after he died, I believe, April 2nd, 1979.
Yep.
And by the way, he drowned. He wasn't murdered.
He wasn't murdered, but you have to admit it does seem a little weird. That guy was, they said, Olympic quality swimmer, drowned in a light like nothing water.
Yeah, but he also had open heart surgery, and open heart surgery back in 1979 wasn't as, let's say, advanced as it is now.
Right.
Ted.
Yeah, so he could have had a heart attack right there, and then he drowns.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know, but they didn't find any bruises on his body or any of that stuff.
No, I get it.
That didn't happen. It was a shocker that 10% of the team went to Steve. 10% of the team went to a couple other people. I think the sisters or somebody, and 70% went to Georgia. It was a shocker. It was really because Steve, and of course he was fired 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And he was very embittered by it because he expected all his life. He worked with it was a surprise. And Georgia, I thought, made some very bad moves. She wouldn't give Dickerson, became very cheap the last couple of years. I mean, they lost Dickerson, maybe among the top 2 or 3 runners in the history of football, if not the best. I mean, that guy, prematurely, they sent him to Indianapolis. And
well, in my mind, you tell me if you feel the same. In my mind, they basically gave up. They didn't give a damn about winning. They only cared about money at the time. The end, you're sitting there in front of small crowds at Anaheim. People didn't want to come because it's like, this team's not even trying to win. No. And then you get rid of Dickerson. It's like, it's over. Now there's no drawing card.
After that, because Robinson had some good years with Dickerson. He did.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He had some very good years. John did a good job with that team. But look at the quarterbacks they had. Skitterish. I used to call him Skitterish Jim Everett, and without a doubt, I think what was his Brock? What was his first name?
No, I know what you're talking about. Brock,
the quarterback, the last one. Well, how can I forget that guy? I wrote about him. My God, he was terrible.
Because you tried to forget it. That's how you forget.
Yeah, you tried to forget it. And unfortunately, they didn't want to pay, and they lost a lot of good players, and they did go downhill at the end.
Yeah, and then they lose the team to St. Louis, mostly because it's like, well, she saw that the fans turned on her for good reasons.
What about that time when Fred Dryer's on the sidelines and they were chanting his name? Remember Fred? And finally got rid of Fred. They
Right.
wouldn't play him. They wouldn't pay him. And that was a. They were bullied. She didn't go down on the sidelines after that game. They were
Yeah.
really bullying her.
Yeah. So then they gave her the money to move to St. Louis, which was her hometown, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and they got Dick Vermeil. That was John Shaw did a good job getting him. He was a good.
Yep.
Dick was a great coach. I knew Dick when he was Tommy Prothrow's assistant when I first started covering the Rams in 1972. Tommy Prothrow.
Yep. All right, let's wrap up the Doug Krikorian stories from a sports standpoint with the Magic Johnson era, and you covered him as a rookie when he, excuse me, just did some unbelievable things and wins the title with Kareem out of the lineup in Philadelphia. Yep. Yeah. So what? I mean, that was a shocker to everybody because we knew Magic was an outstanding player, but all of a sudden he was like all world. It's like, hey, I can play any position. This is easy.
I fell in love with Magic, honestly, when he was a rookie with the Lakers. Once I think I was over at a friend's house and we're watching the game and he scored 2 points and dominated the game. It was against the Seattle Supersonics, who were very good. And the 2 points he scored were the winning points. He set everyone up. He did everything in that game. And I kept saying to my friend, look at him. Look what he does. He doesn't care about scoring. And he made everyone better. And I knew he was really a stud. His ego wasn't in. Magic could have averaged 30 points a game if he wanted to. He was 6'9" guard. You don't think he could drive when he wanted to drive, you saw when the game was on the line what he could do.
Yep.
He was a great player. And he's been, and the hysteria over Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Unfortunately, Magic wasn't there during this, this unbelievable social media. How big would Magic have been? People forget how great he was. I saw probably, all those Showtime. I went to almost every game, just to see Magic. It was incredible.
It really was.
And he'd have won more than 5 championships. It wasn't for Pat Riley taking the team over to Santa Barbara. They always talk about that. I was at Michael Thompson last night at Phil Trainings. Michael comes with all us boxing guys go down there. Steve Kim, and all these people that love boxing. And I go down there once a month. And Michael is a huge, Michael, great guy. He's really a good guy.
I met him, but I don't really know him.
Yeah, well, he's great. And the best Laker team, I thought, was the team that lost to the second year to the Detroit Pistons because they lost Byron Scott in Santa Barbara. He was putting them through two-a-days.
Right.
There was no reason. They were off for 10 days, and he admitted later it was a mistake. And then in the second game against the Pistons, they were leading and outwent Magic with I believe it was a pull hamstring or back.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yes.
And they didn't have any guards, and they got swept. But that team was 11-0 going into the playoffs. I saw them sweep a very good Phoenix team. They swept a pretty good Golden State. Then I think it was 7. No, it's probably Golden State by then.
Yeah.
And they beat another very good team. They were good. They had Orlando Woolridge, who had a great year, and
remember he had the big 0 on his uniform there.
Yeah, they were really, really good. They were good. I think they'd have beat them. That team was better than the team the year before that beat them. And Jerry always said they would probably swept Detroit. They were just better than Detroit.
Yeah, no, they were.
I think.
Yeah. I wish we had more time. We might have to do a part 2 of this because there's so many more stories, Doug.
You didn't talk about Dinah Shore like
I know. I didn't talk about a lot of things, but we've gone well over.
Ping pong with 18-year-old Martina Navratilova.
And that's can we do a part 2 of this?
I would love to. I love you, man. You're a good guy.
That'd be great. I would love. We got so many more stories. I want to hear more Jim Murray stuff.
The European stories. I could
exactly.
Go on
and we're going to talk about the next one. We're going to talk about food and your travel and all kinds. But I don't have. There's no time. There's no time now.
I understand. Come on. Anyway, I understand, Daddy.
I've been waiting to get your ass on this show for a while, and I really appreciate it.
It's been a privilege being with you, Ted. You're a
Thank
good
you.
guy. I've always had great respect for you.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate
I
it.
knew
You're the
that.
one.
You
I
know,
knew there was
you and I
somebody else.
worked together for years. Oh my God.
Exactly.
In
Exactly. And
Sports
you
Talk
even showed up at
Radio.
a few of my Ice Dog games, I think, right?
Yes, I
Doing the long
did.
doing the Long
Vincent
Beach
Collins. Who was the coach against?
John Van Boxmeer.
Who became coach for a time with the Kings? I think.
Exactly. Assistant coach and with Mark Hardy. Our two coaches went to the Kings. They worked under Andy Murray there. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
But we got too many more stories. We got to do this, okay?
I'll do it again.
Thank you. That's Doug Krikorian, folks. If you're under the age of 10, that's the only reason you don't know him. Okay.
You
Otherwise,
know what's funny? People always say, "Is he still living?"
and you tell him, hey, this is not AI, baby. This is me. You look great, by the way. You really do.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We'll do a part 2, folks. I promise. And everybody, happy Friday. Let's have a great time. I got a game tomorrow, the Chargers and the Rams. Let's continue to have a little fun NFL. I want to get a little more NFL. I want to ask you the next time about how the games have changed, too. There's a lot of stuff to talk about there.
Well, you didn't ask me one key question.
I didn't ask you a lot of things. What?
Western Union.
We're going to bring that up the next time.
Pearlie Perlestein. I love Pearlie. I used to give my copy.
I know. Okay. We're going to bring it up the next time. We're going to open up the show with that story, okay? Dougie, have a great weekend, all right? Great to see you. That's Doug Krikorian.
Thank you.
It's as good as it gets, folks.